Macbeth by William Shakespeare. Title: The distinguishing name of a book or a story. The story of Macbeth revolves around the rise and fall of the main protagonist, Macbeth. Through a series of actions, Macbeth's final fate is exposed and he meets his downfall. As the story is about the character development of Macbeth, the title of the story is rightly used. Narrative voice. It is how the protagonist tells the story from his or her perspective. The story is narrated in the third person. The narrator is not a character in the story. Setting: the environment in which a story or event takes place. Theme: theme is the sense which the author of the story wants to portray to its readers. Setting: the story is set in 11th century Scotland. A few scenes are also set in England. Theme: the story deals with the theme of the fall of man. Macbeth meets his downfall due to his excessive pride in his abilities and the wrong choices he makes. In this story, Shakespeare breaks the Greek idea of fate. According to Shakespeare's version, the fate of a man is in his own hand. Macbeth's downfall is not brought about by any external influences. Rather, it's his own perception that leads to his destruction. The story is based on the play of the same name written by William Shakespeare. It is set in Scotland, where the noble and mild King Duncan is waging a war against the traitor MacDonald and the King of Norway. This war was won with the courage of Macbeth. For this honourable service, he was awarded by King Duncan with the title of the Thane of Cawdor. On their way back from the battlefield, Macbeth and Banquo were stopped by three horrible-looking witches who prophesied that Macbeth would be the King of Scotland. Soon he came to know that he was indeed made the Thane of Cawdor. This kindled hope in Macbeth's heart, but he realized that till Malcolm, the son of Duncan and the heir to the throne, lived, his chances of being the king was minimal. King Duncan decides to visit Macbeth's castle. On the other hand, after listening to the prophecy of the witches, Macbeth writes a letter to Lady Macbeth informing her about the prophecy and King Duncan's visit. Both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth were equally ambitious, but Lady Macbeth was more ruthless compared to Macbeth. Macbeth agrees to murder King Duncan. He is urged by Lady Macbeth to take this step. Together they make a plan to murder King Duncan so that Macbeth could become the king. The story moves forward with the arrival of King Duncan to Macbeth's castle. Macbeth and his wife graciously host the king. During the night, however, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth implement their plan and murder King Duncan. After murdering King Duncan, Macbeth is gripped with guilt and fear. He loses control over himself. Lady Macbeth takes control of the situation and sends Macbeth to wash himself while she goes back to King Duncan's chamber to leave the dagger behind. Right after the murder of King Duncan, Lennox and Macduff came to wake up the king. The porter is heavily drunk and he believes that he is the gatekeeper of hell. At this point, Macbeth returns, saying with shock that the king was lying in a pool of blood. In complete contrast to his previous self, Macbeth appeared to be extremely composed. He also creates the impression that King Duncan was killed by his sons Malcolm and Donalbain, as they were nowhere to be found. The death of King Duncan, followed by the fleeing of Malcolm and Donalbain, left the throne empty. This led to the crowning of Macbeth as the new King of Scotland. Though everyone believed that King Duncan was murdered by his own sons, Banquo felt differently as he knew about the prophecy. Macbeth felt threatened by Banquo as the witches had prophesied that Banquo's sons would be king. Therefore, Macbeth plans the murder of Banquo and his son Fleance. Unfortunately, Fleance escapes while Banquo is murdered. Macbeth eagerly waits for the news of Banquo and Fleance's death. He gets the news that Banquo is dead and Fleance had escaped. Soon after this, he goes back to entertain his guests, but he stops short as he sees Banquo's ghost sitting on the stool. Macbeth is shocked to see Banquo's ghost and screams in terror, but the others only see an empty stool. Lady Macbeth takes control of the situation and requests the guests to leave. Following the episode, at the coronation dinner, Macbeth decides to visit the witches once more. This time, the witches warned him against Macduff and prophesied Macbeth's death when the forest moved. The witches also mentioned that no one born of a woman could kill him. Macbeth comes to know that Macduff has fled to England. This enraged Macbeth. As a result, he orders the murder of Macduff's entire family. With the passage of time, Macbeth continued to grow stronger and more ruthless. In comparison, Lady Macbeth slowly breaks apart under the strain of the murder she had planned and Macbeth executed. This leads Lady Macbeth to walk in her sleep and continuously murmur about the murders of King Duncan and Banquo. Eventually, she ends up killing herself. The final two prophecies by the three witches also come true when Macduff's army marches with three branches, giving the appearance of the forest moving towards Macbeth's castle. The final prophecy that Macbeth could not be killed by anyone born of a woman is also fulfilled, as Macduff was removed from his mother's womb before his time. Macbeth meets his end at the hands of Macduff, who beheads him and presents the head to Malcolm. With this, the story comes to an end. Plot diagram: an overview of content that provides a reader with the overarching theme but does not expand on specific details. Exposition: the story begins with Macbeth and Banquo returning from the war against MacDonald and the King of Norway. On their way, they are stopped by three witches who make prophecies about Macbeth and Banquo. They say that Macbeth would become the Thane of Cawdor and then the King of Scotland. Rising action: Macbeth writes to his wife informing her about the prophecy and the visit of King Duncan to their castle. Lady Macbeth and Macbeth plan to kill Duncan while he visits their castle. Macbeth is apprehensive, but Lady Macbeth appears to be very strong-willed. Climax: Macbeth murders King Duncan. After this act, he undergoes a mental breakdown. This is when Lady Macbeth takes command. After some time, Macbeth again gets a grip on himself and takes charge. He murders the guards and blames the murder of King Duncan's son, who had run away in fear of their life. Falling action: Macbeth is crowned the king. He orders the murder of Banquo, his son, and Macduff's family. He slowly becomes ruthless and tyrannical. Macduff joins Malcolm to wage a war against Macbeth. Resolution. Macbeth again visits the witches, who make another prophecy that he would die when the forest of Burnham moved and he could only be killed by someone not born of a woman. Macduff and Malcolm attack Macbeth and kill him. Macduff beheads Macbeth. The story ends with the death of Macbeth. Character analysis. Macbeth. Lady Macbeth. Character analysis. A character is a person or creature that interacts with others within a story. There are different kinds of character in stories and different ways to describe them. Macbeth. Macbeth is the main protagonist of the story. He has been portrayed as an anti-hero. An anti-hero is not entirely wicked but has major flaws in character. He does not stick to the accepted norms for being a hero. Initially, Macbeth is depicted as a loyal and courageous man who is fighting for the honor of King Duncan. Eventually, Macbeth's character undergoes transformation. His ambition drives him to the point of becoming a ruthless, cold-blooded murderer. The major flaw in his character is his pride in his courageous self. He also fails to understand the tricks of the witches. Macbeth finally meets his downfall due to the choices he makes. Ambitious, ruthless, tyrant, anti-hero. Lady Macbeth. Lady Macbeth is the driving force behind Macbeth. She is the master planner. She appears to be cold and emotionless. When Macbeth loses control over himself, Lady Macbeth takes the knife and keeps it back in King Duncan's chamber. A slight effect of her emotion are seen when she sees her father in the face of King Duncan. Initially, though, she appears to be cold. With the passage of time, the guilt of murder completely consumes her. She starts walking in her sleep and hallucinating blood on her hands. At one time, she had told Macbeth that washing the hand would remove all stain of murder. This very notion is completely reversed in case of Lady Macbeth when she hallucinates blood on her hand and murmurs about murders. Eventually, she kills herself. Ambitious, cold, weak. Critical appreciation. Critical appreciation is when a reader examines and evaluates a piece of literature from a discerning point of view. Narrative voice. The story is narrated in the third person. Setting. It is set in 11th century Scotland and some portions in England. Theme. The story depicts the effect of greed. The fall of man is shown to be due to the person's individual choice and not due to fate. Symbolism. Symbolism adds meaning to the text. In this story, the most important symbol is that of hallucinations, which signifies guilt. Blood also signifies guilt. Sleep denotes innocence. Therefore, murder in sleep is symbolic of the murder of innocence. Characters. The main characters are Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, who meet their downfall due to their enormous ambition and pride. Both the characters undergo a change in the course of the story. The story beautifully connects the setting, narrative structure, symbolism, and character to depict the theme of the fall of man due to over-ambition. Thank you.